Identity, the quest for Israel's future, the book, the dialogues, the meetings, the lectures by Emmanuel Shachar. Hello to you, Emmanuel.
Hello, hello.
Let's talk a bit about Ukraine, Putin, Biden, and the local regimes. What is your perspective?
I think this perspective that has to interest us, other than the Jewish community in Ukraine, of course, and in Russia, in this context, is the fact that Ukraine is one of very few countries that gave up nuclear weapons on their own volition. When the Soviet Union broke up, Ukraine was left with more than 5,000 nuclear weapons, which they gave up within the framework of a treaty, the Budapest Agreement. And according to the treaty, the United States and Russia committed themselves to maintain and protect Ukraine's sovereignty and other certain things. And this is obviously not happening. And any country that is thinking of nuclear weapons or thinking of not having nuclear weapons is definitely going to have second thoughts.
Because you're saying that practically the fact that Ukraine has no nuclear weapon, it means that
it's
vulnerable.
It's vulnerable. It's vulnerable. It can be, and it is being attacked, and its regime is in danger. And so is any other country potentially that doesn't have nuclear weapons,
including Tehran,
including Iran. And I think this, what is happening, will possibly make it more difficult for the United States to close the deal now in Vienna with the Iranians. But it's not for sure. But it may have an impact. I don't know. We'll find out about it because the deal hasn't been closed.
It's about to, but it's not signed yet.
Yes.
So it means that the Iranians are saying that a country that withdraws from the weapon practically becomes more vulnerable.
It's vulnerable to outside interference and to outside threats to its regime.
Let's talk a bit about Sheikh Jarrah in our region near to Jerusalem.
Yes, it's also a threat to some extent, not to the regime, but to peace in the Middle East.
Because Hamas
might decide to interfere in the fracas. There's, as long as Israel's government relates to this as a real estate problem and not as an essential part of the conflict, it'll come up again and again and again. And politicians like Itamar Ben-Gvir and also others from the Likud use this stage to put pressure, political pressure on and profile themselves. And Hamas may very well decide to interfere to make a big thing out of something which is not a small issue. It's an essential issue. We have to deal with it. We have to deal with the legal sides. We have to deal with the sides of the conflict. And as long as we're not doing it, we are vulnerable to sudden, to explosions here and there.
And also in the city of Bat Yam, we're talking about extremists from the right wing that are being more and more soundable.
Bat Yam is a Jewish city. It's got about 128,000 Jewish inhabitants and only about 900 Arabs who live there. So it's not a mixed city by any stretch of the imagination.
Near Tel Aviv.
Yeah. Nevertheless, it has become radicalized by some political movements like the Lahava movement and also by people in the vicinity of Ben-Gvir and his crowd.
When he's not in Sheikh Jarrah right now, he finds time to be in Bat Yam.
And there are some local activists who are trying to spread the word that Arabs have to be kicked out and all that. This needs attention from the authorities. Actually, the fact that it's being published is indicative that there may be the attention may be forthcoming, but it's very important to deal with this before it catches on. And because Bat Yam is already a very right-wing city today, 70% of the people there voted for right-wing parties. So we have to make sure that this is being dealt with. This is also part of what the government has to do.
Let's talk a bit about another new article published in Haaretz newspaper, in the digital and also in the paper, talking by Shaul Arieli.
Yes.
The voice of a very, very accurate historian. He writes books about an inner voice from the Israeli consensus talking about Israel and the apartheid as something that is getting closer every day.
It's closer by the day. He basically writes a summary of the Israeli government's policies from '67 onwards, and he points out the absurdities where Israel, in one side, is unwilling to annex the territories. It's on the other side, it's unwilling to make a Palestinian state come up. On one side, it's enforcing the law in the territories, but only in certain aspects, and not over the Jewish settlers there. So they're all kinds of.
So practically saying that
also maintaining the status quo. It's willing to maintain this on one side. Important for it to maintain the status quo, but continuing the settlements in the territory, which is, it's just doesn't work together. And as a result, we finally got UN decision 2334 in 2016 that was not vetoed by the Obama administration, which condemns Israel for what it does in the territories, and we haven't stopped doing it since 2016, which is already 6 years ago. We're continuously breaking this particular resolution of the United Nations, which states clearly that what we do in the territories is illegal according to international law and not acceptable. And now, because of what's happening with Amnesty International report, the apartheid terminology is coming into the game, and we are being accused of apartheid, which is pretty much what is down the end of the line, according to what our policies actually do in the areas.
And it is something that this voice is an inner voice, an Israeli voice, published in an Israeli newspaper, talking about the fact that these kind of actions that you're describing, Emmanuel, are something that is getting closer to apartheid.
Yes. Absolutely.
And the minister, Benny Gantz in Germany.
Benny Gantz in Germany, when he was asked about the situation with the Palestinian Authority, he said he doesn't want to talk about the two-state solution. He wants to talk about an entity solution, because he doesn't want to create hopes for imaginary hopes for something that will not happen. Now, when he talks about two entities, he doesn't know what he's talking about, in the sense that he has no idea what he means by that. Okay, he just means that he doesn't want two states, and what that means, nobody knows.
Maybe the federation might be one of the possible ideas.
Federation could be one of the possibilities. Although federation is actually one entity, but the present government is not seriously thinking about this. They're just playing for time, which is very unfortunate. And when we talk about playing for time, there's a curious publication from a CIA report from
40 years ago.
40 years ago, when Meron Benvenisti, who was a deputy mayor of Jerusalem and is also a researcher, he gave a speech in Washington, and the CIA operative who attended the speech reported the following. On the legal status of the West Bank, Benvenisti argues that Israel is acting not as an occupier, but as a power moving toward establishing permanent sovereignty. Israeli military orders dealing with treatment of West Bankers are being raised to the level of substantive judicial law. There is, moreover, a clear move underway toward dual legislative judicial systems for the West Bank, one for Jews, the other for Arabs. That was 40 years ago.
He was saying,
and we are there. Exactly, this is where we are now, for two judicial systems, and the implication, of course, is apartheid.
And we're conducting this interview on the 2nd of February, 22.
22, yes.
40 years ago.
40 years later.
And when we are going to be meeting 40 years ahead, what is your perspective for the things that you are saying now to the Israeli and the international audience?
We have to we have to move towards equality, civil equality of all the inhabitants of the area under Israeli sovereignty. And if we don't do that, we're going to be in real deep trouble.
Deep trouble.
Yes.
Because of the values, but also because of the actions by the
because
world.
We will lose the support of the Jewish community abroad. We will lose the support of the international community. And we will also lose support of quite a large part of the inhabitants of the State of Israel who are not willing to go for that kind of policies.
Identity, the quest for Israel's future by Emanuel Shachav, people that want to be part of this community.
Through the social networks, through Facebook, Federation Movement, please write.
Write only remarks with respect.
Preferably.
Emanuel Shachav, thank you very much.
Thank you.